Wembanyama broke a 41-year playoff record. The Spurs lost by 2 points. 12 blocks, the most ever in an NBA playoff game. Mark Eaton in 1985, Hakeem in 1990, Andrew Bynum in 2012. Each of them touched 10. None of them crossed it. Sunday night in San Antonio, a 22-year-old put up 12, 11 points, 15 rebounds. The first playoff triple-double in NBA history that finished with double-digit blocks. The Spurs lost 102-104. This is the chalkboard problem. The greatest single-game defensive performance in playoff history sits next to a stat line that says, did not win. The 41-year record fell. The geometry of the floor did not. Let's start with the obvious read. 12 blocks is the most powerful single defensive number ever recorded in a playoff game. The chalkboard owes us an explanation for how it happened. The answer has a name: the deterrence radius. The deterrence radius is the floor area inside which a shot has a meaningful probability of being altered or erased by the rim defender. For a normal NBA center, that radius ends roughly at the restricted area line. For Wembanyama, it stretches several feet beyond. 7'4" frame, 8-foot wingspan, vertical reach near 9.5 feet at the apex of his block motion. The radius is not athletic, it is geometric. That radius is what produced the 12. It also produced the silent number. Every layup attempt Minnesota did not take inside it, every drive that turned into a kickout because the ball handler saw Wemby in the paint and rerouted. The box score counts 12 swats. The truer count is the number of shots Minnesota refused to attempt. That number does not appear anywhere on the stat sheet. 3 players in NBA history had ever reached 10 in a playoff game. Mark Eaton, April 26, 1985 against Houston. Hakeem Olajuwon, 1990. Andrew Bynum, 2012. None of them crossed 10. When Wembanyama crossed it on the 11th block, he kept going. He finished with 12. The conventional read of this game stops there. The greatest rim protection night in playoff history. End of story. The chalkboard does not stop there, because the deterrence radius has a ceiling. Wemby's vertical extension defines exactly how high a shot release point has to live before it exits the deterrence zone. Here is what conventional wisdom missed. The radius has a ceiling, and Minnesota lived above it. Anthony Edwards spent the first half measuring the ceiling. Possession by possession, the release point of a 15-foot pull-up jumper sits at roughly 10 feet of arc. Wemby's reach at the apex of a block motion sits at 9.5. Edwards found the gap. In the fourth quarter, his shot diet leaned heavily on mid-range and pull-up jumpers above the foul line. Every release point above Wemby's vertical reach by design. Julius Randle generated efficient elbow jumpers off the same elevated zone. The mechanism is not a counter screen, it is not a reroute, it is a shot selection adjustment. Minnesota moved the release point above the ceiling. A jumper released at 10 feet of arc is not a shot Wemby blocks, it is a shot Wemby contests with a hand that arrives 1 beat late. That 1 beat is the difference between a swat and a make. This is the chained piece. Edwards is not doing it in isolation. The pull-up gravity is generated off Randle's elbow read. When Randle catches at the elbow with Wemby helping over, the rotation tax pulls Wemby off the rim. Edwards reads the moment Wemby's heels leave the paint. He releases above the ceiling. The mid-range jumper is the visible shot. The Randle elbow gravity is the invisible setup. This is not settling. Settling implies a worse alternative was passed up. Against Wemby, the rim is the worse alternative. The pull-up above the ceiling is the optimal shot. The Spurs got 12 blocks at the rim. The Wolves got the entire floor above it. And the entire floor above it is where the basket still hangs. Now flip the chalkboard, watch the other end of the floor. Wembanyama's scoring line in Game 1, 11 points. A full game total in a playoff Game 1, despite playing the role of generational anchor on offense and defense. That number is the second answer the chalkboard owes us. 12 blocks tells us Wemby's defensive footprint. 11 points tells us his offensive footprint cannot tilt the floor enough for the supporting cast to match Minnesota's pull-up diet. Here is the arithmetic problem. Wemby's gravity rolls inward toward the rim because that is where a 7'4" rim threat creates the highest leverage attempt. When Wemby rolls, he pulls a help defender to the dunker spot. He does not pull two help defenders to the elbow when he catches. The supporting cast inherits a one defender tilt, not a two defender tilt. Minnesota's defensive rotation was already weighted toward Wemby's roll axis. The Spurs guards could not punish the perimeter because the Wolves' off-ball defenders did not have to commit two bodies to a single Wemby rotation. Compare this to the Edwards-Randle two-man action. The Randle elbow catch tilts two defenders. Edwards inherits a two-defender tilt, different floor geometry, different shot menu. The chained read. The bench unit collapsed because the only non-Wemby gravity source on the Spurs roster, perimeter creation from Vassell or Castle, generated near zero rim attempts when Wemby was on the bench. Wemby on the floor. Gravity rolls the wrong way for the supporting cast. Wemby off the floor. The half-court arithmetic does not survive. The Spurs lost by 2. They were never 2 points away from a different game. They were 2 points away from a different roster. So here is the verdict. Rim deterrence is not floor deterrence. 12 blocks is the most powerful single defensive number ever recorded in an NBA playoff game. It is still a number measured at one zone of the floor. Minnesota played above that zone. San Antonio could not generate enough offense around their generational anchor to outpace what Minnesota harvested above his reach. The steel man, the honest one. This is a Game 1 anomaly. Wembanyama scored 11 because the schedule of a generational defensive game is exhausting. He will hit 22 when the workload normalizes. The blocks number proves the chalkboard is on his side. The Spurs lose Game 1, they win the series. That is the book Greg Popovich will sell to the Spurs locker room before Game 2. On its own terms, it is reasonable. The problem is that the 12 blocks does not change Wemby's offensive gravity profile. His gravity rolls inward toward the rim, where Minnesota's defense is already weighted. The Spurs cannot manufacture an above-the-radius pull-up game of their own without a guard who lives in that zone. The half-court arithmetic in Game 1 said that guard is not on the roster yet. Edwards' pull-up at 15 feet released above Wemby's release ceiling is not a shot San Antonio's roster has a structural answer to. Game 2 may compress the points per possession gap. It will not change the geometry. So here is the chalkboard's verdict. 3 zones of the floor. Zone 1, the rim. Wemby owns it. 12 blocks, new NBA playoff record. The deterrence radius worked. Zone 2, above the radius. Minnesota owns it. Edwards mid-range. Randle's elbow. The pull-up arc Wemby cannot reach. Zone 3, the half-court around Wemby. Neither team owned it. That is why Minnesota won. San Antonio could not generate a pull-up diet of its own. Wemby's offensive gravity rolls inward. Minnesota's defense was already weighted there. The 41-year record fell. The chalkboard kept score the same way it always has. Game 2 is in San Antonio 48 hours. Same building, same defender, same record holder. The question on the chalkboard is whether the Spurs can manufacture an above-the-radius shot of their own, and which guard on the roster is the one to take it. The deterrence radius held. The arithmetic around it did not. Next episode of Chalk Tactics, we go inside the asymmetric one-on-one matchup that decides this Western bracket and ask whose chalkboard breaks first. Until then.